All I wanted was a damn cappuccino. I still remember the moment it all started. Not with a big idea, not with a genius pitch, not even with a well-timed investment. Nope. It started with a very badly timed sneeze and a hot cappuccino flying through the air in a busy downtown cafe. It was a Tuesday, raining. I was 29 and broke, working a boring office job at a company that replaced me with an intern 2 months after I left. I hadn't had a raise in 3 years. My car made sounds like it was haunted, and I was constantly negotiating with my bank app to stay positive, emotionally and financially. The cafe was my only escape. I'd go there every morning before work, not because I loved coffee that much, but because it was quiet, warm, and didn't judge me for ordering the cheapest item on the menu. That particular morning, I sat down at my usual window spot, juggling a plastic fork, a paper napkin, and a cup of cappuccino. I was scrolling through job listings I'd never applied to, half watching a guy nearby who looked way too happy for 8:15 a.m. when I felt the sneeze coming. One violent achoo later, I knocked my entire drink into my lap and partially onto the laptop of the guy sitting at the next table. He looked up slowly, like a teacher about to give a detention. "Dude," he said, wiping foam off his trackpad. "I am so sorry," I said. "I'll pay for dry cleaning or repairs or therapy, whatever you need." To my surprise, he laughed. "Relax, I've spilled worse. Besides, this thing is half dead already." We exchanged a few awkward words, and I offered him to buy him a replacement drink. We ended up talking for almost an hour. His name was Theo. He was a software developer working remotely for some startup in Toronto. Turns out, he'd been coding since he was 12 and recently launched a side project, a free tool that turned handwritten notes into editable text. I didn't know a thing about coding, still don't, but something about his demo fascinated me. "You should charge for this," I said. He smiled. "Yeah, I might." And just like that, I'd met the guy who would accidentally change my life. I didn't have a plan, I had an impulse and a lot of free time. The day after the cappuccino incident, Theo emailed me a link to his little web app. It was called InkSync, not the catchiest name, but somehow fitting. I clicked around, uploaded a picture of my messy handwritten grocery list, and sure enough, the app spat out a neat, editable version in seconds. It was clunky, sure. The UI looked like it hadn't been updated since 2007, and sometimes it mistook milk for MILF, which made for some awkward autocorrect moments. But still, it worked. I replied saying it was brilliant. Then I added a second sentence that changed everything. Ever thought of letting people upload classroom notes or meeting scribbles and charging $1 for the clean version? Theo called me 10 minutes later. "You know, I've been thinking about that," he said. "I just don't have the time to market or manage it. I like building things, not selling them." And before I could overthink it, I said, "Let me try. I'll see what I can do." I had no marketing background, I wasn't a tech guy, I didn't know SEO from CEO, and I certainly didn't have a business plan. But I had something maybe more valuable at that moment. Free evenings, an underused Twitter account, and absolutely nothing to lose. I started by redesigning the landing page using a free template. I wrote the copy myself. Turn scribbles into searchable bold. Fast, cheap, magical. I paid $47 for a domain, scriblify.io, because InkSync sounded more like a failed tattoo parlor than a software tool. Theo was cool with the rebrand. Then I did something bold. I launched it on Reddit. Not as a marketer, just as a user. I posted on a productivity subreddit. I've been using this free tool to digitize my notes from client meetings, and it saved me hours. Figured some of you might like it too. I included a link, then closed my laptop and went to bed. The next morning, my phone looked like it had been struck by lightning. 17,843 visits, 3,112 conversions, all in 12 hours. My free premium feature, which just included faster processing and export to Google Docs, had netted me $947 overnight. Theo messaged me, "Dude, what is happening?" I messaged back, "I have no idea. I think we're in business." Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Day 3, we got flagged for high traffic by the cheap hosting service I'd signed us up for. Site crashed. I panicked.
Theo calmly moved everything to a cloud server and optimized the back end. Then we got our first angry customer, a professor who claimed the app had butchered his lecture notes and made him look like a lunatic. I offered him a full refund. He refused and asked to invest. Yeah, you read that right. Within 2 weeks, we had over 10,000 users. A few were even emailing us to ask if we offered a desktop version. We didn't, but we started building one. Or rather, Theo did. I handled the email replies and tried to sound like we were a much larger company than we actually were. I learned about churn rates, conversion funnels, the importance of white space on landing pages, and how terrifying Stripe analytics could be when a payment failed. At night, I couldn't sleep, not because I was stressed, but because I was excited, addicted even. I'd check traffic stats the way some people check their step count. By month's end, we'd made $13,430. I was still working my boring day job through all of this. I'd sneak in email replies during lunch breaks, schedule tweets while pretending to format spreadsheets, and pitch our tool to strangers on Slack communities I barely belonged to. And then one afternoon, I looked at our Stripe dashboard and saw the number, $49,992, in revenue, in 5 weeks. I leaned back in my chair, surrounded by spreadsheets I no longer cared about, and laughed. All I'd wanted that morning was a cappuccino. Now I was halfway to a 6-figure side hustle built on a sneeze, a spill, and a stupid amount of beginner's luck.
You'd be amazed how fast excitement turns into anxiety when real money gets involved. Once we crossed $50,000 in revenue, things started to feel real. Not, hey, this is a fun little project real, but you might want to consider an LLC real. Theo and I had a long call that weekend. He was pumped. Said he'd never seen one of his side projects take off like this. I was thrilled too, but beneath that excitement was a flicker of panic. Imposter syndrome? Check. Fear of screwing it up? Double check. I think we need to make it official, I said. Like, form a company. Maybe hire a designer. Maybe, I don't know, a lawyer? Theo agreed. We split the equity 50-50 and registered Scriblify LLC. We found a freelance designer on Upwork for the app's interface. I nearly cried when I saw the first mock-up. It actually looked like something people would pay for now, instead of something that lived in the corner of the internet like an awkward middle school project. A few weeks later, our big break came from an unexpected source. TikTok. I still don't know who she was. Some 19-year-old college student posted a 20-second clip using our tool to convert her messy exam notes into Google Docs. Y'all, I'm never typing again. This thing just read my chicken scratch like it went to med school. The video hit 1.2 million views in 3 days. Our user base exploded. We had to scale servers overnight. Theo barely slept that week. I was answering emails at 3 a.m., mostly from panicked students who wanted to know if our tool worked on calculus notes. It didn't. We were still working on math recognition. But here's what stunned me. Our first $100,000 month. We stared at the dashboard in disbelief. Theo texted me, Do we hire people now? I replied, I still eat ramen 3 times a week. Let me process this. We decided to reinvest most of it. We added OCR for diagrams, math symbols, even chemical equations. We created a freemium model with tiered pricing and launched Scriblify Pro. Then for the first time ever, I took a leap. I quit my job. I still remember walking into that beige office, looking at my manager's cluttered desk and saying, I think it's time I moved on. I half expected him to laugh. Instead, he gave me a look that said, You just won the lottery, and I'm still stuck here. Then he nodded and said, Go for it, man. The next morning, I woke up as a full-time startup founder. I didn't even know what that meant yet. We moved fast after that. By month 6, we hit $500,000 in total revenue. Theo and I paid ourselves modest salaries and hired our first 2 employees, a support rep named Nia and a back-end developer named Raj. Suddenly, we weren't a scrappy little project anymore. We were a company. And for the first time, the pressure kicked in. Customer expectations rose. We had uptime SLAs to honor. A school district in Oregon emailed us about an enterprise license. I had no idea what that even meant, but I said yes, then Googled like mad for 3 hours. At night, I lay in bed wondering if I was qualified to run anything.
let alone a business that had helped over 200,000 users by that point. And yet, despite all the chaos, the one thing I kept thinking about was how none of this would have happened if I hadn't spilled that cappuccino. It's all fun and games until someone clones your app. We were flying high. New users, real money, press mentions, even an interview lined up with TechCrunch. But success makes noise, and noise attracts competition. It started quietly. An anonymous email to our support inbox. "Hey, just FYI, someone launched a tool that looks a lot like yours." I clicked the link. My stomach dropped. Same concept, same name structure, similar interface, eerily similar. Even their pricing tiers mirrored ours, except theirs were cheaper. Scribble.adi. I showed Theo. He was silent for a full minute. "They cloned us," he said finally. I nodded, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "Yeah, and they did it fast." Overnight, we went from feeling invincible to vulnerable. I guess we always were, we just hadn't realized it yet. The next 2 weeks were war. Not literal war, but business war. We doubled our marketing spend, launched a beta of a mobile app we weren't quite ready for, and scrambled to find any feature that could set us apart. I started calling this the sleepless sprint. Theo and I barely left our apartments. I was working 16-hour days, fueled by microwave burritos and dread. But something funny happened. Instead of panicking, our users rallied. They tweeted about us. They made side-by-side comparisons and chose us. Not because we were cheaper, but because they were real. Because they'd been with us from the beginning. That's when it hit me. People didn't just love our product, they loved our story. So I started telling it. I wrote a thread on X, formerly Twitter, titled, "How I Accidentally Became a Co-Founder by Spilling Coffee on a Stranger's Laptop." It went viral, like 600,000 likes viral. That thread brought in another 80,000 users. We were invited to speak at a virtual education conference. I was asked to do a podcast about accidental entrepreneurship. I almost said no, I hated my voice, but Theo pushed me into it. "People buy from people," he said, "and people love this version of you. The guy who didn't plan it, but made it work anyway." He wasn't wrong. By year-end, Scribblify had earned $1.8 million in revenue. We hired more devs, we built out a customer success team, we finally leased a tiny office downtown. Just enough space for 5 people and a bad coffee machine. And then one morning, I looked at my bank account and saw it. $1,034,276.19. That was my personal cut, after taxes, after salaries, after investments. I stared at that number like it was a hallucination. I didn't scream, I didn't buy a sports car. I just sat there, remembering the version of me from a year ago, hunched over a cracked phone in a rainy cafe worried about affording rent. That version of me had no clue what was coming.
Being rich didn't feel like I thought it would. Being useful did. The funny thing about seeing 7 digits in your bank account is nothing really happens. The sky doesn't turn gold, birds don't start singing your name. Your problems don't disappear, they just evolve. You still drink the same coffee, unless you're Theo, he switched to some $22 Ethiopian cold brew. You still have laundry to do. You still worry, just about bigger things. But one thing did change. I finally gave myself permission to breathe. That weekend, I took my first real vacation in over 2 years. I went to Oregon, just me, the woods, and a tent. I didn't bring my laptop, I didn't check emails. I let the stillness reset something in me I didn't know was broken. I journaled, thought about my parents, how proud they'd be, how confused my dad would be trying to understand what machine learning meant. I thought about the students who used Scribblify to pass finals. I thought about that girl on TikTok who unknowingly changed everything with a 20-second video. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like someone who built something real. When I got back, I told Theo I wanted to do 2 things. First, I wanted to start a fund, something small for underrepresented developers building weird, clever tools like ours. Not startups with VC polish, but raw, duct-taped side projects.
The kinds of things that would get laughed out of a pitch meeting, but might actually help someone. Second, I wanted to spend more time talking to users. Not surveys, not metrics, real conversations. He was surprised, but he got it. Most people would be buying real estate in Bali, he joked. Yeah, I smiled. But I'd rather find the next Scriblify. Looking back, the craziest part wasn't the money. It wasn't the growth. It wasn't even quitting my job. It was the randomness of it all. One spilled coffee. One apology. One side project shared with a stranger. That's all it took to reroute my entire life. So when people ask me, how did you become a millionaire? I tell them the truth. By accident. And by answering an email I almost deleted.